Welcome to Financial Issues, where we join reality with truth, helping you make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now listen in as we give you the practical tools and advice you need to become a biblically responsible investor.
Good morning. Welcome to Financial Issues. We're so glad that you could join in today. We are a ministry that helps to educate people about financial issues from a biblical worldview. If you're not a partner with us already, we hope that you will consider becoming one. For just $132 a year, you can get access to our biblically responsible investment strategy, including asset allocation models and buy list recommendations. We also alert you when you need to sell a company that's been on our buy list before. If you are a partner too, this is a short week, so our commentary will be posted a little bit later than usual. It's usually posted late Monday sometime, but it will be up by the end of the day today, not necessarily the end of the business day, but at some point today, hopefully by late afternoon, our commentary for this week will be posted along with any changes to the buy list. On today's show, we're going to talk about the state of the economy. We're also going to try to make sense of what might be happening early this month in September and looking forward. We'll also answer some of your questions. So whether you're a partner with the ministry or maybe just a casual listener, if you don't get the opportunity to call in or maybe you're too shy, you can always go to our website, which is financialissues.org, and submit your question on there under the Ask Shana section of the website. Our stewardship verse today comes from Ephesians 5:15 and 16. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of time because the days are evil. Well, you know, good stewardship is not just about money, even though that's what flashes in our mind, that the dollar signs flash in our mind when we start to hear people talk about stewardship. But, you know, sometimes people end up having more time than they have money. But we have to remember that God owns it all. He is sovereign over all time, all money, over everything. He is all sovereign. So we will be judged on how we handle our time as well as our money. So we don't need social media to show us how evil the days are, although if we spend any time on social media at all, we will be convinced very quickly that the days are evil. And social media can be one of the biggest consumers of our time. So we have to be good stewards in everything that we do. What do you think, Seth?
That's well said, Shana. Yeah, the days are evil and time is slipping away, so we got to be wise. You're exactly right. And it's so simple, Shana. In order to be wise, all you have to do is ask the Lord for wisdom. And that's the first step, and then walk according to his ways, and you'll find yourself becoming more and more wise. And he will give that wisdom to us. That's a great news. So, Shana, as we seek that wisdom, we have come to a close in the month of August. We're almost through the end of the third quarter of the calendar year. I'd just love to take a moment and ask you your thoughts. Where does the economy stand today as we're only a few weeks away from the next Fed meeting, 2 months out from the 2024 presidential election? We had somewhat chaotic month of August that ended rather well. But what can you tell us as we try to make sense of all this?
Well, for many months now, I've been saying that I think that the economy is actually weaker than what the numbers are actually telling us. America is on the brink of dire straits, not just financially, but spiritually. This country is about to reap what we've been sowing. So I would propose to you that we are in the brink of harder financial times because many Americans have become spiritually bankrupt. Spiritual bankruptcy is driving us towards fiscal bankruptcy. So, you know, whatever values we have, that's going to dictate how we act, you know, in all areas of our lives. So as a nation, we can't even balance a checkbook. We can't balance a budget. We've rejected common fiscal sense, and we've let 6 minus 2 become 36. What do I mean by that? You know, well, $6 trillion a year in spending is what we're doing as a nation, while we're bringing in $4 trillion in revenue. So $6 trillion in expenses with $4 trillion in income is -2. So that's, basic math. I mean, any third grader basically can do that math, and all those negatives over, and it's not just been the Biden administration, it's been administrations going way, way back. All of those negatives have totaled up to almost a -$36 trillion in debt. So, where we sit right now, there's really no doubt that the Fed is going to cut. They've even said that they're going to cut. It just depends on how much they're going to cut in September, depends on this jobs number that's going to come out at the end of this week. So kind of all eyes are on that.
Yeah, that was my next question, Shana. We have that jobs number coming out. What do we need to know about this?
Well, I've got a chart, and when I was talking to the partners last week, I shared some of this information already. I just couldn't show them the chart, so now we actually have the chart to show them. Yeah. And what we're looking at here, this goes back quite a ways, but where we see those two lines deviating, and what we're looking at the establishment survey versus the household survey in regards to these jobs numbers. And so, parts of these surveys ask households, what are you experiencing in the labor market? And then the other survey asked establishments, ask businesses, what are you experiencing in the job markets? And so there has been a disconnect since March of 2022. You see where those lines start to deviate, and the deviation is getting bigger and bigger. So since March of 22, households have been reporting a much bleaker job picture than businesses have been. So why is this? Well, we start to look into the numbers, and we see that adjustments are made to the numbers by government officials to estimate certain measures. So in that household surveys, one of the things that they estimate is the creation and disappearance or dissolution of small businesses. It's called the birth-death model, and there's lots of that. Well, I won't say there's lots. There's a handful of economists that have just been screaming about this at the top of their lungs, and nobody seems to be listening. But if you're a quote-unquote nonpartisan bean counter, in the government, you're in the administration, and you're working for the Bureau of Labor Statistics or the the Labor Department, and you're involved in estimating some of these things, are you going to estimate things in favor, to make the current administration that probably hired you and that you probably support? Are you going to make assumptions that make things seem better for them or worse for them? I would submit to you that you would probably lean towards making them things look better. So there's been this miscalculation in the birth-death model that has caused not only this disconnect, between what households are saying and what businesses are saying, or what the government interprets businesses to be saying, but this big revision that we've got of close to, and I think it probably will end up being closer to 1 million jobs from last March to this March that just disappeared. We won't even get that final revision until February. But,
yeah. It's interesting stuff, Shana. And so considering all of this, should we be expecting, and I know this is a crystal ball question, but just from your wisdom, should we be expecting a market correction in the near future, considering all these things, including how overvalued the markets have become too?
Probably. And, that is the thing, is that the markets have become overvalued. I was reading an article just this morning talking about how optimistic and how bullish investors are, that, optimism is flying high right now. And, that seems to always come before the fall. It's individual investors tend to do the wrong thing at the wrong time. They tend to get excited about things when they shouldn't and get pessimistic about things when they shouldn't. So, a lot of market strategists right now are predicting a correction, but corrections happen on average every 1 to 2 years. So are we due for one? Yeah, probably so. Over the last 10 years, the S&P has lost an average of 2.3% in September, according to data from FactSet, and September is the worst month for the broad market over that period. For the last 4 Septembers, the market has posted a loss for the last 4 years in September, including a 9.3% plunge in 2022. So, not saying all that to scare you, but just saying that to be prepared. It's part of investing. You have to take the downs with the ups, or you can really do it. Well, we've got to take a break, but stick with us. We're going to be right back with more financial issues after this break.
We are indeed facing into the wind of this cultural holocaust to try to provide loving, compassionate, Christ-centered answers to these women. The greatest thing they need is the ability to make sound judgment decisions in their life, and that comes from the Lord Jesus Christ, a heart change that only He can bring. So we're evangelists to these women on behalf of the Financial Issues audience, and helping them to be able to move forward with wisdom in their lives when they come in, not just to save the life of their baby, but also to save the soul of the mom and the baby eventually as well. It's one thing to talk about it, but it's certainly another thing, and so encouraging to see the pro-life ministry, a financial issue stewardship ministry, take a stand on this thing and do something so effective as we've done.
Yes, sir.
Go to financialissues.org/preborn to learn more about preborn.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay, or to go, to remain the same, or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common: the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
Well, folks, thanks for joining us here, Financial Issues. Shana, we've been talking about what's going on in the economy today. And kind of my final question for you here is, we talk about pockets of opportunity often. What can you tell us about the pockets of opportunity with where we sit today, with everything we just talked about?
Yeah. So, we kind of coined that term, pockets of opportunities. There's typically, for most situations, there's going to be something on our buy list. Even when the buy list shrank a whole lot a couple of weeks ago, there were still some things on the list. So there's always kind of pockets of opportunity. There's a phenomenon in the investing in the economy called the business cycle, where we have peaks and we have troughs, and during the times when everything is doing well, there's certain parts of the economy that tend to really fly high. And then when things get tighter, when things get worse in the economy, there's people are still buying toothpaste and toilet paper, and companies can still be nimble. They can make sometimes tough business decisions to cut their costs, meaning laying off people or whatever they have to do to survive and keep their margins intact. And so, it's umbrella makers don't make much money when the sun is shining, and sunscreen makers don't make much money when it's raining. So, even if we come to a time down the road, which lots of people think that we are heading towards, if the United States continues down the road of socialism and Marxism, and we continue to destroy capitalism, I won't like it. I much rather prefer to make a U-turn and go back towards capitalism, but there will still be pockets of opportunity. AI is good or bad. It's an unstoppable trend, in my opinion. It's coming. It's going to happen. AI needs a lot of energy. It needs, some are saying, double the energy that we have right now, that we currently produce. But guess what? We have lots of energy in the ground. And if we get a president who recognizes that opportunity, then we'll be able to capitalize on that. So, there'll be some opportunities in the utility sector. There'll be some opportunities in the energy sector. Unfortunately, wars need ammo, and there are companies out there that produce that ammo. People will still continue to eat. People will still continue to pay their electric bills. And like I said, use toothpaste and toilet paper. China is not a truly capitalistic economy, but there are lots of people who still make money in Chinese stocks. That's not an area that we feel super comfortable in. So, we tend to avoid it. But there's, to that point, there's been a lot of Chinese companies that tend to make really good returns. So, even if the U.S. continues down the unfortunate path that we're headed down with socialism and Marxism, there will be companies who will accept the offer. And this has been going on for a while. I mean, just think back to the government bailouts, during the financial crisis, the big banks that got bailed out, the big car manufacturers that got bailed out that took government money. But, I would caution those companies to really think twice before they take money from the government or go into business, quote unquote, with the government, because they will become beholden to the government. Case in point right here, there's a Newsmax Money article that I read recently that said Senator Scott is pressing the Intel CEO, on the CHIPS award after the job cut, after they announced their job cut plans to cut jobs. Seth, did you see some of that?
Yeah, Shana, I did. It's really interesting. So Senator Rick Scott basically called on Intel to provide details on the company's plans to slash these jobs. More than 15,000. That's not a small job cut there. Scott noted in a letter to Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger that the company was awarded $20 billion in U.S. grants and loans to boost chip production and demanded an explanation for these job cuts. Now, Scott questioned whether the Commerce Department's planned awards failed, quote, to include real metrics that would protect taxpayer dollars from going to companies that could not meet high standards for U.S. manufacturing and job creation. The department then had previously announced a preliminary agreement back in May for $8.5 billion in grants and up to $11 billion in loans for Intel, along with a 25% investment tax credit. Very interesting.
Yeah. So you take $20 billion and some tax credits from the government, and then you start laying off people. By the way, these the money that they're taking in the tax credits were specifically designed to create jobs, and now you have Intel laying off. Don't think that the government's not going to ask some tough questions. So
yeah,
you really have to be careful there. So speaking of tough questions, do we have any?
We do. We do have a couple doozies here, Shana. Let's start with Don, age 75. Don is saying, I'm seeing many advertisements about buying gold as protection against the dollar/market failing. What is your opinion about buying gold? And if you buy it, where do you keep it?
Well, so it's not a big secret. I'm not a huge fan of gold. Now, gold has done well this year. The gold is actually beating the S&P 500 over the last year by 3 points. Gold is up 28%. The S&P 500 is up 25%. But it's not a long-term trend. If you look back, I jotted down some numbers here. Over the last 5 years, total return for gold has been 61%. Total return for the S&P 500, 93%. That's 50% more return. Over the last 10 years, 90% return on gold, 185% on the S&P 500. So, I'm not a huge fan of gold as an investment. I'm open to partners having some gold as part of a diversified portfolio. I do think that I wish we never would have left the gold standard. I do think that as inflation goes up, as the dollar starts to fall, that gold will probably continue to do well. But, I think there's just as many stocks out there that can do just as well as gold. So if you do, I would say it would be for some kind of, doomsday scenario, financial collapse scenario, that if, all of our dollars become worthless and, those kind of things happen, that you might be able to still buy some things with gold. So if you do it, I would limit it to, 5% or less, maybe 10% if you feel really strongly about it of your overall portfolio. I would keep it because, the United States has a history of, and a growing history of power grabbing. And, if these kind of things happen, I don't suspect that the government will just say, oh, well, we don't want to have power anymore, so you guys just do what you want. No, they're going to go after the gold. They could do what they've done in the past. They could confiscate gold. They could make it illegal to use it as a currency. So those are the things that you have to be careful with.
Good, Shana. Thank you for that. Peter's up next here. Now, Peter's asking about a couple of different, I believe they're ETFs here. And so we'll say these here. So he's asking, are Investco Bullet Shares and iShare iBond ETFs a good alternative to trying to buy individual bonds for my fixed income allocation? 67 years old.
Well, no, because they're not clean. So if you screen them on our biblically responsible screener that you can find on our website, just go to financialissues.org, click on resources and go down to evaluator. If you run those symbols through evaluator, they come up dirty. So it's not something that we would even consider. Besides that, check the rates just on Tuesday of this week for CDs, and a CD ladder, short-term CD ladder, still seems like it's a good place to be. So if you are taking our advice, building a 6-month to 2-year CD ladder, the rates were still in the neighborhood of 5.1 to 4.7%. So hovering around those upper 4s, really low 5s is going to be a way to lock in those rates, at least for another year or two. I would also encourage you to look at the preferreds. We have 3 preferreds on our list right now, and they are yielding between 6.3 and 7.5%. So they are technically classified as equity investments, but you'll notice recently we made a change to the description of the asset allocation models. None of the percentages really changed, but we just started to include your preferreds in the fixed income portion. So, and this is kind of forward looking a little bit, because I think it will become harder and harder to find CDs that are getting good rates as we start to see interest rates start to fall. So preferreds is a good alternative if you can't find any good yielding CDs.
Good stuff, Shana. I think we have time for one more here. Bob is 72. He's asking about a recent interview he saw. The person who was interviewing basically said that during the pandemic, they would periodically take money from their 401k to buy tangible assets versus electronic assets. And he's just wondering what your thoughts are on this, Shana. Is it a good idea to buy syrup or other items to barter with? I know Dan would mention peanut butter often. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so, I am a fan of being prepared for catastrophes. I mean, I live on the coast, and so we see this every year with the hurricanes and everything. So, I think it's a good idea to have, several months worth of food stored up for whatever kind of catastrophe may happen, because, that's that you can't eat gold, you can't eat dollar bills, but you can stay alive if you have some food on hand. So, food and water, those kind of things. And you're right, Dan used to say, My jar of peanut butter is going to be way more valuable than maybe even your bar of gold or, pile of dollars that you have, if it comes down to it. So, yeah, don't go overboard with it, but I think it's a good idea to be prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. Shana, it reminds me, I think a lot of people think like, okay, I got to prepare for a long time. In a situation like that, let's face it, we're probably not lasting very long because the end is coming, Yeah. So
and I don't want to be honest.
That's exactly right.
I'd hate to die of starvation or something slow like that. But,
Yep.
In the viewpoint of eternity, it's a very small thing.
Yeah.
Well, folks, if you listen to an outlet that only carries the short version of the show, we hope that you'll find us on some social media or better yet, our phone app, because then you can listen when it's convenient for you. For the rest of you, stick around. We're going to be back with more financial issues right after this break.
It's easy to get caught up in the rush and forget about what really matters. Too often, we invest in stocks without knowing what they stand for. When your investments align with your values, your money speaks for you. Because biblical values matter, even when investing. Learn how to invest biblically and responsibly. Visit financialissues.org to learn more. That's financialissues.org.
Hi, this is Shana Bird, the host of Financial Issues. The Financial Issues family is so blessed to have saved tens of thousands of babies, all thanks to the generous support of you, our listeners and viewers. For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds. Please go to preborn.org, that's preborn.org, or financialissues.org and click on the Preborn logo. Save a baby, save a life.
Fear and uncertainty can cause us to hold things tightly and rely on ourselves. But during uncertain times, as believers in Christ, we are called to surrender fully to our sovereign God. The call to surrender to Jesus is one step in our growth in holiness. And it doesn't just mean you give over a few things. It means He gets it all, including our finances, our investments. Learn a biblically responsible investment strategy proven over 25 years. Keep the money God has entrusted to you out of companies that participate in things that God detests. Fully surrender. Become a Financial Issues Partner today. Learn more by going to financialissues.org/join. That's financialissues.org/join.
Well, this property was actually purchased by my great-grandfather, and we were able to come back to the farm a few years back to keep the family farm, hopefully in the family.
Working together is a lot of fun sometimes and can be very challenging.
Iron sharpens iron.
Iron sharpens iron.
We want to try to provide the freshest possible and healthiest possible produce for our neighbors and our friends and the people that we are able to touch in their lives at the farmers markets. Samaritan Ministries is a perfect fit because we feel like we can actually partner with other Christians to help them provide for their medical needs.
We're Tony and Ginger Malik, and we are Grandma and Grandpa's farm in Sparland, Illinois, and we are Samaritan Ministry members.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shana are hers alone and are for informational purposes only, and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it, and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Thanks for being here with us today. Phone lines are open, 610-363-1110. I appreciate you all. We're starting the month of September here, so my favorite time of year, actually, fall, and then Christmas coming after that. Of course, it's going to be good. It's good to be here with you all today. Thanks for joining us and sticking with us here on the show. I want to follow up, actually. So Bob's question that Shana just answered in that last segment there. Bob, it's a good question, and I wanted to share some kind of concluding thoughts to that there. So the question, just to recap, was Bob essentially was wondering, is it a good idea to take money from a 401k, for example, to buy tangible assets, whether it's maple syrup, bartering type things. And Bob, I think just like what Shana said, it's a good idea to do it in small chunks. You don't need to go overboard for sure, but it's a good thing to think about, definitely. I think you're on the right track. I think what you have to think through here, brother, is what might I need in a possible emergency situation? So when I say emergency situation, I'm not saying that, there's a bad storm and your power's out. I'm saying there's World War III. It's the end of the world as we know it, essentially, or it's coming at least. Nuclear war, something like that. Disaster, anarchy. If this is happening, here's what we have to do. You do your best. You say, okay, I'm trusting that the Lord is protecting me here and that he's going to bring me safely home. And it might be sooner rather than later. Which means if that's the case, you might not need to plan for as long as you think you do. Now, I'm not trying to play God here with any of this stuff, but it's just something to think about. So here are some things that I would tell you to have some of those tangible items that you were talking about. Enough cash on hand to get somewhere. I think that's actually part of why when we mention here on the show to have a small amount of emergency cash at home, that's what it's for. It's for an emergency situation like this. If you need to get to the hospital, you can fill up your gas tank. If gas has gone up to $10 a gallon, for example, you can still fill up your car. That's actually the second thing I would say is a working vehicle. Be good to have a working vehicle to be able to get somewhere in case you need to flee somewhere. Somewhere also that is away from the chaos, speaking of which. Now, you may live in an area of the country where you feel like that's a safe area. Maybe it's wooded. It's not near that many people. And I'd say that's great. I think as a rule of thumb, staying away from major cities would probably be a good idea. I have a buddy from church who has a house kind of out in the sticks, and we have an agreement. I told him if something goes down, I'm coming to your house. I would also say rations, food that will keep, just like Shana mentioned, peanut butter, clean water to drink. And this might depend on where you are. You might have a water source. Maybe you need a water filter or something like that. I think those could all be good things to consider. And also, I think very importantly, is a way to defend yourself and your family in whatever way you feel most comfortable doing that. I think outside of those things, Bob, there's really no need to go overboard with the tangible assets. If you survive that apocalyptic situation, praise God, that's great. And if you don't, then you'll meet the Lord if you know him and trust him. And that's why we speak so often about that. It's the most important thing. None of us knows the day that we'll die. And if something like that were to happen, we need to make sure that our hearts are right first and foremost, because it could happen at any moment. That's true all the time, but especially true in situations like that. Good question, Bob. I appreciate that. The markets here, folks, let's get to it. Speaking of relative chaos, a tough way to start the month of September yesterday on the first trading day of the month. The markets fell pretty heavily yesterday. By midday, all three major indices were down more than a full percentage point. The tech-heavy NASDAQ was leading the way downward. It was approaching 3 percentage points, and it would prove to be the worst day for the major averages since that plummet to start last month in August. By Tuesday's closing bell, the Dow Jones was down 1.5%. The S&P was down about 2.125 percentage points, and then the NASDAQ was down about 3.25 percentage points. So a big day downward for the markets. Part of this drop was from NVIDIA. You notice NASDAQ, the tech-heavy NASDAQ was the kind of the one that got hit the hardest. NVIDIA fell 10 percentage points yesterday on accounts of what appears to be a DOJ antitrust subpoena. Now, I'm not sure if this is actually solid news right now, but there is something in the works there. As you know, NVIDIA has cornered the markets on AI and chips. And so that's what we're seeing there. So the markets had a tough day yesterday. The pre-markets were trending in that direction as well. And as we've opened right now, two of the major indices are negative, the NASDAQ being one of them and the S&P being the other one slightly. The Dow Jones is up about 0.33% right now. So we'll see how that continues today as the day moves forward. A headline that I wanted to share with you, and I'd love to get your thoughts here in the chat, folks. The headline is this: Americans reveal their biggest financial regrets. Very interesting. So 77% of Americans have financial regrets, according to a new Bankrate survey. That number is probably higher, but My guess is 23% might be lying, or they might just be forgetting. Among this share, the number one regret, that's 22% of respondents, was not setting aside funds for retirement early enough. Very interesting there. Northwestern Mutual reported in April that the amount of money that Americans on average think they need to save, which is about $1.46 million to retire comfortably, but have only set aside an average of $88,000 or so for retirement. This report also found that 18% of respondents regretted not establishing an emergency fund, 14% felt remorse over racking up too much credit card debt, 40% said they have made no headway in rectifying their financial regrets over the past year. Folks, if you're watching on the chat, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. What is your biggest financial regret from your life? And this is not to shame anybody. I just love to hear your thoughts as someone who's a little bit younger and has some regrets of my own, which I actually would love to share with you all right now. One of them is not making more of an effort to get a steady job while I was in high school. When I was in high school, I did what was right in a sense and focused on, kind of my school was my full-time job, but it wouldn't have been the worst idea in the world to be able to use the skills that I had to try to make a little extra money here or there while I was in high school for 10 hours a week or 15 hours a week or something like that. I didn't try to do that. I probably should have. One other one would be willingly taking student loans to help pay for college. If I could have wiped that out, that would have been great. Those loans have been paid off. Praise God. That's wonderful. But if I could go back and change that, I would not take student loans. Also, I think this is a big one, is making too much of an effort to keep up with the Joneses. That was a big one for me, particularly for me. And I don't know if it was true for you folks as well. It was the family. It was the in-laws. It was a sore spot for me, I think, as I worked in youth ministry, where, as I often say about youth ministry, you work full-time hours, often more than full-time hours, and you make a part-time salary, and that's just the way it goes. When Megan and I got married, I think I was making $20,000 a year in 2016. Now, that number increased significantly not long after that, thankfully, but that was what it was. And I think from that point on, it kind of set a trajectory for me where I always wanted to give the appearance that I could provide for my wife, provide for my family, that we had, a house and a car and all that stuff. And I think I rushed some things there. So if I could change that, that would be one. Last thing I'll share is not coming to work at Financial Issues sooner than I did, because this job has been nothing short of a tremendous blessing through and through, not only for being able to provide for my family, but also being able to work at such a place like this where I get to be surrounded by believers, get to spend time with all of you, and get to learn a whole lot about this concept that I didn't know much about before, which was money. So those are just some of mine. I'd love to read some of yours. I don't know if any of you have put those in the chat yet, but one of them, Claude says, not buying Apple in the 90s. Yeah, Claude, I understand that, man. And I don't know if Apple at any point was once biblically responsible. Of course, it's not now, but could have been back in the 90s. So yeah, I totally understand that one. Yeah, that's good. Any other comments that we have in here? Robert saying, not starting my investing earlier in my life. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, man. And that was similar to one of the ones that we read there on the on the article there. It's really good stuff, folks. We have to remember the Lord uses our mistakes to refine us, make us wise, and He works all things for His glory. And that's great news and can hopefully provide you some freedom from regret. So be thankful that the Lord has brought you through where He's taken you. We'll be back with more financial issues right after the Ag Report with Craig Haugaard. Stay tuned.
This is Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update for September 4th. Well, corn was pulled higher by short covering yesterday. This moved the market enough that it hit a bunch of stop-loss targets, and that in turn led to more buying and pushed the market higher. When the smoke cleared, the funds were credited with buying 25,000 contracts during the session. And as a result, December corn was 8 1/4 cents higher at $4.09 1/4. Beans benefited from a dry start to the Brazilian planting season, plus an unwinding of the soybean-bean oil spread, which had traders buying soybeans and selling soybean oil. Brazilian headlines point to a concern about a late planted crop, as farmers in that nation are reluctant to plant until some moisture shows up. This could lead to reduced acres and cuts in yield. At the closing bell, November beans were 12 cents higher at $10.12. Wheat was pulled higher by corn and beans, and as a result of the rally, the U.S. has lost some competitiveness in the export market. Now, the Russian hard red winter wheat equivalent is currently being offered at $40 per metric ton discount to U.S. wheat. While yesterday had the Minneapolis December wheat 6 3/4 cents higher at $6.07 1/4. Kansas City rose by 11 cents to close at $5.76 1/4. And Chicago was 6 3/4 cents higher at $5.66 3/4. Cotton futures chopped around in a pretty tight trading range, and at the closing bell, we had December futures 51 points higher at 70.50. Livestock futures were all just a touch higher. October live cattle rose by 67.5 cents, closing at $179.27 per hundredweight. October feeder cattle were $1.57.5 higher, settling at $239.32.5 per hundred. And we had October lean hog futures up by 30 cents as they ended the day at $82.52.5 per hundredweight. Class 3 milk futures are working back up towards the recent contract highs. Now, yesterday we learned that bird flu was reported on 3 different dairy farms in California over the weekend. That made it the 14th state to have the bird flu virus in dairy cattle. At the close, October futures were 38 points stronger as they closed at 23.25. This has been Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update. We'll be right back with more financial issues after this.
Fear and uncertainty can cause us to hold things tightly and rely on ourselves. But during uncertain times, as believers in Christ, we are called to surrender fully to our sovereign God. The call to surrender to Jesus is one step in our growth in holiness. And it doesn't just mean you give over a few things. It means He gets it all, including our finances, our investments. Learn a biblically responsible investment strategy proven over 25 years. Keep the money God has entrusted to you out of companies that participate in things that God detests. Fully surrender. Become a Financial Issues Partner today. Learn more by going to financialissues.org/join. That's financialissues.org/join.
How is Timothy Plan continuing to lead the fight as you guys now enter your 4th decade of leading this fight of biblically responsible investing?
We've been too silent for too long, and we can no longer be silent. You stand up like Ronald Reagan said, we're only one generation away from losing all of our liberty. Yeah. It has to be fought for. I wish it didn't. And you can fight for it. You don't need guns and ammunition and that. You can fight for it, especially with your dollars, because it's always about the money. And when the money starts impacting people, they start paying attention. When we launched this, they said it couldn't be done, but here we are 30 years later. They said you couldn't get competitive returns, but here we are.
What a tremendous testament of God's grace.
Go to financialissues.org/Timothy Plans to learn more about Timothy Plan.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Hey, thank you all so much for sharing your comments in the chat there. I saw a couple more coming in here. Some of you were certain stock picks, as we mentioned earlier. One of you, Brian, had found, I think one of you, it might have been Brian, had been looking at some stock picks from Jim Cramer. And yeah, that's, it's tough, guys, to consider. We look at our past mistakes. My wife tries to help me with this all the time because I think I was such a moron back then. I was such an idiot. And it's just a reminder that God continues to work and refine us. And we have to say, thank you, Lord, for your continual grace in my life. And I see that on display with all of you as well, sharing that. And I appreciate that so much. And even the wisdom that each of you have shared in the chat as well, it's great. So hopefully that can be of an encouragement to you as we think about our past financial regrets. They do not define us or control us today. So it's good stuff. Hey, the conference call, by the way, last week posted. So make sure you take a listen to that when you get the chance. This week, folks, a bit of a busy week. I think you heard Shana mention this earlier in today's show and somewhat yesterday as well. So today we got the U.S. trade deficit. In about 10 minutes, we'll get those job openings numbers. That's a rather important one. We'll also get factory orders in the Fed's beige book later today. Thursday, tomorrow, we'll get ADP employment, initial jobless claims, ISM services PMI, and then Friday is somewhat of a big day as well, non-farm payrolls and the U.S. unemployment rate and hour wages. So we'll see if we can make some sense of what's been a rather confusing look into the jobs markets lately. But hey, some good news. Talk about funding the light. The state of Arkansas is winning. The state of Arkansas is doing some great things here. Let me tell you, the state of Arkansas dedicated $250,000 to the creation of safe haven baby boxes. Safe haven baby boxes. Now, what are these exactly? Well, essentially, they're placed on the exterior wall of a designated fire station or hospital in states with safe haven laws that allow mothers to legally and anonymously surrender newborns. So it's essentially almost like an emergency adoption. Like you know, obviously it's not an adoption in the sense of there's not a parent there to help the baby, but there is someone there to help the baby, which is amazing. So when the newborn is placed in this box, it triggers an alarm that allows a medical staff member to secure surrendered newborns from inside the designated building and give them the help that they need before they figure out the next steps for these babies. There have been more than 150 safe haven surrenders so far across several pro-life states. In fact, Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who was a personal friend of our founder Dan Celia, by the way, said that the grant program will provide resources and give struggling new moms safe options that help build a culture of life in the state. Folks, this is great news, and very similar as well to the work that our friends at Preborn are doing to save babies. It's not just okay, we're just trying to get the baby saved and then we're not going to help the baby or the mother. Preborn actually champions itself as an organization that saves babies in the womb and then helps keep them saved outside of the womb and helps the mothers as well. So it's great stuff. You got to check out preborn.com. Just go to financialissues.org and click the Preborn banner as it shows up there. But I wanted to share that with you. I thought that was really cool, seeing a personal friend of the ministry there doing some great work, Governor Sanders. So that is awesome there. All right, Grant, let's get to some partner questions here. What have we got?
All right, we have a question from Ronald. What do you think about Newsmax's potential IPO?
Ronald, thank you for this question. We've addressed this earlier in the summer, but however, I'd be glad to share a few of the insights we have with you. A couple things first. The comments I'm going to give you in no way say anything negative about Newsmax as a news outlet. I believe they're a quality outlet. They're a conservative outlet. We see Newsmax as a friend and an ally for us. Last I checked, they've had a lot of success. I think they're the fourth largest cable news outlet in the nation to date. Now, to your question specifically, so Newsmax will be going public at the end of this year. I think it's 2025, maybe early 2025 or right around Christmas time of this year. I would tell you, and I don't speak just for myself, but for the ministry, is that it'd be a good idea to wait to purchase this company or any company like it that's about to go public until we can see what their trajectory is. You know, we saw this recently with DJT. We want to see trends of long-term success. We don't just want to see the next new buy, the next new conservative buy, even the new Christian buy. We want to see consistent trends of long-term success. Now, I'm not saying you have to wait decades for this, but it's more than just, okay, we see a company, it's about to come public, we're going to buy it. That's not the way it works. And as we see with a lot of these, IPOs, it can be pretty chaotic. I mean, we've seen that with DJT as well. We want to see signs of health in the company. Now, I think Newsmax, a very successful company, it's been successful, but what happens sometimes, and I'm not saying this will happen with them, but what can happen is privately owned companies will enjoy success in private, but then they can't replicate that success when they go public. It's different management. Some companies do really well as private companies and not so well as public companies, and some vice versa. So I don't want to say that in any way to predict this is going to happen, but it's just something that we need to be aware of, and that's why we're taking a bit more of a cautious approach with it. That said, it's great news. I think it's awesome. I would advise you wait to make any moves with the company until you hear otherwise from us. So I hope that helps you there, Ronald. That is a good question. Anything else we have, Grant?
Yeah, we have a comment from Gregory. With the recent reversal of Lowe's regarding their previous LGBTQ stance, will FISM be issuing a buy on that stock? I previously held the stock until the sell alert was issued. Yep, that's a good call, Gregory. Thank you. We mentioned this a little bit yesterday. And Gregory, let me just say I appreciate your faithfulness to be biblically responsible. That is awesome. Here's what we're going to do, and I want you folks to listen very carefully to this. Shana talked about it yesterday. I'll try to recap. Hold off on getting back into Lowe's for now. If you
sold the company, stay out of it for now. There are some other things that our team is looking into, our team of financial analysts, that they're looking into to see, basically wanting to dig deeper before we feel comfortable putting it back on our list. Shana said this yesterday, again, it bears repeating. If you sold the stock when we issued the sell alert, which hopefully you did, hopefully you sold the stock. We assume most of you did. We assume almost all of you did. Refrain from getting back into that stock until further notice. Now, whenever this happens, there's always some people who will miss the sell alert. I'm not trying to call you out here. It happens. There are some other people who might go rogue and maybe saw the sell alert and said, you know what, I'm just going to hang on to this for a little bit more. I don't recommend this, neither does Shana. That said, if you still have the stock, you don't need to sell it now. Hang on to it if you still have it. Just know if you do that, we're not keeping the same level of tabs on this stock that we were, because it's not on our list anymore. Until we see that it can be ready to return to the list, then we'll start doing that. So it's a little bit nuanced with this one. We're thrilled that Lowe's has turned its back from the nonsense in corporate America, but what we want to see now is that they can move in a positive trajectory. Again, just like we were talking about with Newsmax long term. So Gregory, it's a good question. I hope that clears it up. It seems like for you acted on that sell alert, which was the right move. So I would tell you, just stay out of it for now. Okay. And I do appreciate that question. I want to remind you all that we do have a letter of support for Lowe's. We want to make our voice heard, knowing that they did a great thing. Whether they did it for the right reasons or not, that honestly doesn't really matter. They did something that was really good. And so we have hundreds of signatures so far. We're going to keep this petition up, or this letter of support up, until the end of the day tomorrow. So I think the last time I checked, right around 700 signatures. I'd love to try to hit 1,000 if we can. Let's see if we can do that. Our deadline, EOD, tomorrow. So you've got time to do that. I will drop that link in the chat right now. If you have not gotten a chance to sign that petition yet, please do that right now as we speak. So just put that in there. You should be able to get that chat if you're in the chat right now. And before we close, folks, we also had a comment yesterday from Alejandro that I wanted to get to. I just have to find it here. Alejandro is watching on Facebook. He said, good morning, Shana and Seth. I was really tempted to call yesterday because of the DVD that we were giving away, but I let someone else get to it. Could you please tell me how much it is, where I can get it from? I really want to get it. Thank you so much. God bless you. Yes, Alejandro, thank you for asking. If you listened to our live show yesterday, folks, we offered a copy of Dan's DVD that he produced several years ago called Fed Up, about 10 years ago or so. This is just great interviews, great content from Dan Celia, of course, and timely for today as well. I'm going to say this for you, Alejandro. If you are a partner of the ministry already, if you could make a donation of any amount, it can be whatever the Lord leads you to give. I'm not going to put a dollar amount on it. Make a donation of any amount to the ministry and let Pat know that Seth said, hey, with this donation, I'd like a copy of Fed Up. And if anybody would like a copy of Fed Up today, I'll open that up to you. If you want to make a donation to the ministry, or even if you want to become a partner, if you're not a partner yet, you want to become a partner, I can say we would be glad to throw this in for you also. So make sure you get your hands on Fed Up. Great work from Dan Celia. About a 30-minute documentary. It's really good. So Alejandro, go ahead and do that if you're listening on Facebook. Well, folks, markets, as we come to the close of our show today, the S&P has turned positive now. The NASDAQ is still negative, and the Dow Jones is positive also. So we'll see if the markets can maybe turn course from what they were looking at yesterday. Quick kind of downer headline to end our show for the day, but the Harris campaign seems to be killing the American dream with soaring home prices, unfortunately. There was a Republican National Committee release that cited a new report showing home prices rose at a record rate in June. The RNC said there's, quote, little relief in sight as Americans face the most unaffordable housing market in history, adding that the, quote, American dream of home ownership has been rendered completely unattainable in Kamala's economy, which is very interesting because right now in California, the Democrats over there are trying to make illegal immigrants eligible for up to $150,000 loans for down payments using taxpayer funding. This legislation would permit non-U.S. citizens to apply for a state-sponsored down payment of 20% of their first mortgage under the Dream for All home loan program. And if passed, this bill will free up about $300 million from the state's general fund. There's a lot of chaos happening, folks. The Lord is on the throne. I want to tell you that to assure you, to encourage you, and hopefully you were encouraged by today's show. It was great to be here with you all today. Lord willing, we will do it again tomorrow. Hey, tomorrow I've got Twyla Brace joining me later in the program. We'll have Shana in the first part as always, and then Twyla later on, so make sure to join us tomorrow. Until then, it's all His. Let's be found good and faithful stewards. See you tomorrow.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.